What would you do if the mother of your children, aged 7 and 11, disappeared? She went on vacation, never returned, and you didn't hear from her again. My name is Janice Rovin. I'm an attorney. I specialize or practice in the area of family law. That is a question that someone brought to me over the summer. But now that I have your attention, or at least I hope you do, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and how my life affected how I solved the problem of this man who came to me after missing his children. So I graduated from Emory Law School. I did an LLM in litigation. I came back to New York and started my practice defending doctors who allegedly committed malpractice. I then opened my own practice and had the pleasure of working for big companies, RJR Reynolds, RCN Cable, again defending them in lawsuits. So Janice, what are you talking about family law? Well, something happened in my world that changed my life. My son Miles, born, as I said, 16 years ago. My son Zach, born 11 years ago. Fast forward to our bar mitzvah picture taken by our lovely Brett. And now fast forward to that's what we really look like, and I still think I'm taller than my kids. Okay, maybe not. And now Violet, who I am taller than. What happened was, 14 years ago, I was sued by my ex, who I was with for 2 years, for custody of my biological son. So what's so unique about that is that my ex was not legally related to me, nor was my ex any portion of, was not the sperm donor for Miles. So that was pretty unique. So the next thing you know, my life was kind of upside down and inside out, and I was involved in the biggest lawsuit of my life. I made the, I made the decision, of course, not to represent myself, but what I learned from that experience is how a lawyer can essentially destroy a family from ever being able to work together, whether they're divorced or married. And I became aware of something I call conscious tenacity. Big difference between destruction. So this guy calls me 4 months ago and says, I have no idea where my wife is. I have no idea where my kids are. And I said, well, I can't really find them. So I suggested that we look on social media for, actually, can we have a heart? People usually start their lives with love, right? Something happens, that's where we are. So this guy, he comes to me and he says, I don't know where my kids are, I don't know where my wife is. We find out that she wants a new life. She wants to be Beyonce, and she's now performing in Washington at a club. So we file a petition, a petition for habeas corpus, which means produce the body. So he wants the kids to be produced in the Bronx, where he lives at the courthouse. He serves her, believe it or not, at 9 o'clock at a nightclub, and his kids are at this nightclub. Unbelievable. So he comes back, and he has joint custody. I say, let's file a petition for sole custody. So now we have to find her again. And she's no longer performing in Washington. And incredibly, she sends a change of address to ASCAP, which ends up at his house. So now he knows that she's living in North Carolina. She enrolls her kids in North Carolina. And this gentleman who lives in the Bronx, who has joint custody of his kids, can't see his kids. She won't really let him talk to them. And the process begins. So we have several court conferences. The woman who's traveling from North Carolina, every single time she's supposed to be in the Bronx, the bus breaks down. Okay, so she gets on the phone with the judge, and in the course of the conversation, she actually tells the judge that the boyfriend who she's living with tried to kill her, and that her husband, or the father of the children, actually got her into a shelter. But the next day she decides, for whatever reason, to return to the home where this guy is trying to kill her. Anyway, fast forward, believe it or not, to Halloween, which I find it to be profound that we were there on Halloween. And the judge says, great that you produced the bodies, which are the kids, fantastic. Okay, Daddy, why don't you have a weekend with your children, and I'm going to send the kids back to North Carolina. And actually, she had this conversation with all of the lawyers, and I said, Judge, you cannot do this. This is not in the best interest of the children. Why? Because the woman went back into a house where the boyfriend threatened to kill her. And the judge said, okay, come back this afternoon, because she couldn't make a decision. which again, I find incredible, but you know, you have to be consciously tenacious. Because most other lawyers, once the judge decided this is what we're going to do, they would have said, okay, sorry, client, your kids are going back, have a good weekend. But I just thought that this was such the wrong decision. So when we came back in the afternoon, the judge said, I'm not going to hear this decision. My job was just to get the kids up here. I'm going to throw it to another judge. Believe it or not, we went to 2 other judges. Until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we were trying to find a judge, and finally, somebody would hear our case. But before and all during this time, the hours that we were in the court, I was trying to resolve this with this other attorney. Because, again, you can really a lawyer can really destroy a family. And I said, look, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? And this guy was having none of it. And I finally said, well, okay, it's Halloween. How much time do you want, can this daddy see his kids? An hour. And I said, you know what? This is untenable. You are not, in my opinion, acting fairly to these kids who have lived essentially with their daddy and their mommy for all of these years. So the gloves, I must admit, came off at that point in time. And we argued. It was actually the most aggressive argument of my career. And since I've been practicing for 35 years, that's a pretty long time. And I just wouldn't let up. And the judge actually said, Daddy, you have custody, temporary custody. Mommy, you can see the kids whenever, you know, you guys work it out. And the kids are now, we're living with the daddy. And yesterday, actually, we went back to court. And somehow, the mommy just said, I don't want custody anymore. You, Daddy, can have the kids. I will bet money on the fact that these people are going to get back together, but that's a whole different story. Because people do come to me with broken hearts. And at the end of the day, although it's really not my job, you try to mend their hearts to a point where there's something whole between the mommy and the children or the daddy and the children. So that's kind of my story on how I used the very unfortunate part of my life to try and help other people go through the process. And David told me this morning I should talk about something happy. That I think is a happy ending because the kids are very settled in their home with their daddy, and mommy is actually relocated to the Bronx, and that's why I think these people are getting back together. So I just want to talk very briefly about money, which I really hardly ever talk to when I give these lectures, and what happens when you get married. Perhaps to the right person, perhaps to the wrong person. When you get married, whatever your money becomes ours. So 10 years later, when I have $100,000 in my 401k and you have nothing, that $100,000 is generally split. It's the equitable distribution of marital assets. So if your partner spends a lot and you save a lot, the money that's left gets split. Everything is split in the equitable distribution of marital property. And essentially, it means that everything is split 50-50. So your debts are split 50-50, your assets are split 50-50. So kind of the tip of the day is be careful who you marry. Because if you're marrying somebody who doesn't hold the same moral compass of spending and saving, in the end of the day, if God forbid you get divorced, there's going to be a big financial hit to you. So thank you very much. Janice Roven, Cornwall.